My name is Martha Collins. I'm 83 years old, and I've survived the Great Depression's shadow, my husband's slow death from cancer, and a house fire in 1986 that nearly took my youngest son. But I never thought I'd be fighting for my life in my own bed, at the hands of the woman my son married. It was dark, nearly 2 a.m. I could hear the wind whistling through the old oak trees outside. But the air in my bedroom felt too still, too heavy. My eyelids fluttered open, and in that instant I saw her, kneeling over me, pressing a pillow hard against my face. Her eyes were wild, her teeth clenched, and I could barely make out her whispered words. "Just stop breathing, old woman. It'll be over in a second." I fought. God knows I did. My arms were weak, flailing, but I was not ready to go. Suddenly, crash. The bedroom door burst open, flooding the room with light and noise. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows. Uniformed officers shouted her name. "Stephanie Collins! Get on the ground!" She froze, her hand still gripping the pillow, eyes wide with disbelief. And in the very next breath she screamed. Not because of the police, but because standing in the hallway was my son Thomas. Her husband, Playboy. And in his hands was the very will she tried to kill me for. What no one knew yet was how it all began, and how, in silence, I watched my own family unravel. Slowly, painfully, until death nearly kissed me goodnight. Let me take you back to the start. 3 years before that night, I moved into the little guest house behind my son's big, beautiful home in Charleston, South Carolina. It was supposed to be temporary. Thomas insisted. Said he didn't want me alone after my hip surgery, and Stephanie, his lovely new wife, smiled and called me Mama Martha the whole time. Back then I believed her smile. At first, everything felt like a warm southern dream. I had my tea on the porch each morning, birdsong in the air, and my son checking in between meetings. Stephanie was always around too, sometimes too much. She cooked me meals I never asked for, rearranged my room when I was out. And once I found her standing in front of my medicine cabinet, just staring. I laughed it off. But the first real shiver came the day I caught her in my room, holding my old jewelry box. It was shut, but she was tracing the top with her fingers like it was some kind of treasure chest. When she noticed me, she flinched, then smiled. "Oh, just admiring how vintage this looks," she said sweetly. I didn't say anything, but I locked it up that night. A few weeks later, Thomas came home with a folder full of legal documents. He said, "Mama, let's get your affairs in order, just in case something happens." I looked up from my crossword puzzle and blinked. "Why? I'm not dying." "It's just smart," he said, glancing toward Stephanie. "You know, medical directives, the will, peace of mind." I trusted him, so I did it. We updated the will. I included Thomas, my granddaughter Lily from my late son Peter, and the church I'd supported for 40 years. Stephanie wasn't in it. She didn't need to be. She was his wife, not my child. But a shift happened after that day. Stephanie stopped calling me Mama. She started calling me your mother whenever she spoke to Thomas. She made snide remarks about how much electricity I used, how many groceries I added to their list, how long I took in the shower. I stayed quiet. Until the day I overheard her on the phone, talking to someone about a very valuable inheritance that just needed a nudge. I didn't sleep that night. Things escalated slowly. I started finding expired pills in my medicine bottles, sugar in my salt jar. Once my oxygen tank was turned off. I didn't want to believe it. Didn't want to accuse. But when I fainted in the bathroom and cracked my temple on the tile floor, I knew it wasn't my age. Something was off. I started documenting everything. Dates, times, odd behaviors. I even called Lily, my granddaughter, who worked with a private investigator. She helped me install a camera in my room, hidden in the corner behind an old bookshelf. Weeks passed. And then one night I woke up coughing uncontrollably. My throat was dry, the air smelled strange. I rolled over and saw a small burning dish by my heater. Stephanie had left something smoldering there. I don't know what it was. Herbs. Chemicals. Could barely breathe. That's when I stopped being silent. I showed Lily everything. The video clips, photos, the journal entries. And Lily, God bless her, took it straight to the police. But the plan was to catch Stephanie red-handed. To let her try one last time, while the police waited outside watching. No. I had to pretend I didn't know a thing. I slept with one eye open every night for a week. And then that night came. The night she crept in. The night she pressed that pillow down. The night she would have taken everything from me. My breath, my home, my life. But she didn't count on the red blinking light on the bookshelf. She didn't know she was being watched. She didn't know the will had already been changed again. She didn't know my son had already begun to suspect her. And now, as the handcuffs clinked around her wrists, and the flashlight beams flooded her teary face, the only words I whispered were, "I'm still here." But what none of them knew, what not even I fully understood, was that this betrayal had deeper roots. This wasn't just about money. It was about secrets that stretched all the way back to my husband's death. And now, those secrets were clawing their way to the surface. Please don't go anywhere. Next chapter will show you how the poison started long before the pillow. If this story has gripped you so far, drop a comment, like, and subscribe. There's more truth ahead than you're ready for. You may think the most painful part of betrayal is the act itself. But it's not. It's the quiet before. The weeks. Months. When you begin to feel like you're being erased, and you can't quite put your finger on how. It wasn't always like that with Stephanie. The first time I met her, Thomas had brought her over for Sunday dinner. I was still living alone back then. Just me and my parakeet Ruby, in the little white house on Grove Street. My knees were giving out, but my hands could still whip mashed potatoes smoother than any restaurant. Stephanie walked in wearing a pink dress that didn't wrinkle when she sat. Her smile was wide, her eyes darting. She complimented everything. The china, the drapes, the way I had trimmed the rose bushes out front. I thought, what a kind girl. A little eager, maybe. But sweet. She brought me wine that night. White wine, expensive kind. I didn't even drink, but I poured a glass just to be polite. She laughed with Thomas, laughed with me, held my hands and told me, "You remind me of my own mama." I didn't know then that her own mama had passed. I didn't know then that she had no contact with her family at all. Estranged, she said later. But I wondered if it was something else. Still, I welcomed her. What else is a mother to do? They married 6 months later. I wore a sky blue dress. I gave them my blessing. And when Thomas said, "Come live with us when the hip surgery's done," I agreed. Why not? Family should be close. It was only after I moved into the guest house that I started to notice little things. Mail. Some days I'd get none at all. Not even junk flyers. Stephanie would collect the post before I woke, and hand me only what she thought I needed. First it felt like kindness. Then it felt like filtering. Then my social security check came late. Then my church newsletter never came at all. Called my pastor. "We've been sending them, Martha. Every week." I said nothing to Stephanie. I didn't want drama. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Then came the incident with my bank card. I had left it on the kitchen counter by mistake. Something I never did. The next morning it was back in my wallet, but something inside me said to check the bank app. Withdrawals. 2 of them. Grocery store and gas station. Both places I hadn't been in days. Asked Thomas. He looked confused. Steph usually picks up groceries. When I gently mentioned the charges, he said, "Maybe she used your card by accident. You share a last name now, it happens. But accidents don't happen twice." That night, I overheard them arguing. Stephanie was crying, telling him I was losing my mind, that I was getting forgetful, that she was scared for me. The next day, a pamphlet for assisted living was left on my nightstand. Stephanie said it must have come in the mail. I stayed quiet again, but I started writing everything down. I logged every strange moment. The time my shampoo was replaced with a cheap brand that made my scalp burn. The day I found moldy food in my fridge. Food I hadn't bought. The week my phone calls suddenly dropped in the middle of conversations. My old friend Lorraine came over one afternoon and asked, "Why haven't you called? I've left you 3 messages." Stephanie smiled from the kitchen and said, "Martha's been resting a lot. You know how it is." Well, I didn't know how it was. I wasn't resting. I was being isolated. I began to feel like a ghost in my own life. One night I walked into the kitchen and found her on my laptop. She shut it fast and said she was ordering something for me. Later I checked the history. She'd been searching, "How long does it take for sleeping pills to stop a heart in elderly?" and "accidental fall life insurance clause." My hand trembled as I closed the lid. I wanted to run. But where would I go? So instead I went to the only person who never lied to me, my granddaughter Lily. She arrived the next day, driving 3 hours from her apartment in Savannah. She hugged me tighter than usual. "You look pale, Nana." I told her everything. The card, pills, the arguments, the searches. She didn't hesitate. She called a private investigator the next morning. He came disguised as a cable repairman and installed 2 cameras, one in my room and one near the back porch. We waited. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. Then the video captured her pouring something into my tea. When I didn't drink it that day, claiming I had a headache, she grew agitated, angry even. That's when Lily took the footage to the police. But the police couldn't act just yet. It wasn't enough. So we set the trap. I wrote a fake will. One that cut Thomas out completely. It was bait, left purposely in a drawer near my nightstand. I called my attorney and made sure the real one was safe. Then I waited. For days, Stephanie ignored me completely, cold as stone. Then one night she made stew. Said she made too much. Offered me a warm bowl. I pretended to eat, then dumped it in the sink after she left. The next morning, she looked disappointed to see me alive. And finally, one night, I heard the creak of my door at midnight. She was wearing gloves. She was barefoot. And in her hands was a pillow. But she didn't know I'd pressed the hidden button under my bed frame. The one that triggered an alert. Within minutes, the police were at the door. And just as she tried to push the pillow over my face, they crashed in. I shrieked. It's not what it looks like. But it was. Everything had been documented, recorded, time-stamped. But what tore me in two that night wasn't the pillow. It was Thomas. He stood in the hallway, frozen, devastated. He looked at me, not as a son looks at his mother, but as a man who realized he had brought evil into his home. But what Thomas didn't know yet, what none of them did, was that Stephanie had never truly loved him. She had loved something else, someone else. And that man was about to come back from the past. Don't miss the next chapter. There's another face behind the pillow, and this story is only just beginning. If you're still with me, like, comment your thoughts and subscribe. You won't believe what's coming next. The morning after the attempted smothering, my home was filled with police officers, whispered statements, and the crushing silence between me and my son. I sat upright in my hospital bed. They'd taken me in for precautionary checks. But my eyes weren't on the 4-drip or the machines. They were on Thomas. He hadn't spoken a word to me in hours. He just sat in the corner, his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor as if all the oxygen had been sucked out of the world. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red. "Mama," he whispered, Did you really think she would kill you?" I didn't answer right away. I looked at the bruises on my arms, the tear in my nightgown, the tightness in my throat. I didn't think Thomas. I knew. His face crumpled. But behind that sorrow was guilt. I could see it building in him like a storm. He had married her, defended her, watched her gaslight me again and again. And the most painful part, he thought I was exaggerating, or worse, losing my mind. He got up and walked to the window. I thought she loved me. I thought we were building something real. I didn't have the heart to tell him the full truth yet. That Stephanie never loved him. That she'd been feeding lies to someone else this entire time. That there was a man, another man behind all of this. But the detectives found something that made it impossible to keep secrets for long. While searching Stephanie's car, they found a second phone. It was hidden inside the spare tire compartment, wrapped in foil to avoid tracking. Lily and I were in the kitchen with the lead officer when he brought it in. She tried to factory reset it before her arrest, he said. But we recovered some data. The texts were chilling. A thread of messages dating back over a year. All from a contact saved as M. Lines like, "She's still alive. But not for long. Once the will's in your hands, we disappear. Mexico, like we said. He suspects nothing. Keep him distracted." My breath left me. I sat down, shaking. Lily whispered. She wasn't working alone. And she was right. That man, M, was the real reason behind the slow poisoning, the lies, the manipulation. The name behind the initial was Marcus. Marcus Dane. An old flame of Stephanie's. A man with a long record of fraud, theft, and domestic abuse. A man Thomas didn't even know existed. But I did. You see, when they first moved me into the guest house, I heard a phone call. Stephanie was pacing in the backyard. I was inside, folding towels near the open window. She was whispering harshly. "He doesn't matter, Marcus. I told you, we need the old woman out first. Then we can move." At the time, I brushed it off as maybe a work call or an overdramatic chat with a friend. Now I knew better. Marcus had been involved in all of this, manipulating from the shadows while Stephanie played house. They planned to drain my accounts, forge the will, and disappear together. But it didn't end there. Police dug further and uncovered hotel bookings. Stephanie had reserved a 2-week romantic getaway in Cancun, under the name Stephanie Dane. She was planning a whole new life. And she was willing to kill for it. When Thomas saw the evidence, he collapsed into the chair beside me, his hands shaking. "Why didn't you tell me, Mama, about any of this?" I looked him in the eyes, holding his hand. "Because every time I tried, she twisted it. You were in love. And I didn't want to come between that. I just prayed you'd see it for yourself." To sob. But what he said next chilled me more than anything. I saw signs, but I ignored them. I thought, if I ignored the cracks, the house wouldn't collapse. That's the thing about denial. It doesn't protect you from the truth. It only delays the destruction. But there was more to uncover. Stephanie had not only stolen from me, she had stolen from Thomas too. Using his signature, she'd opened a joint account and siphoned thousands of dollars over several months. She used him. She lied to him. She nearly destroyed him. But the woman who tried to smother me had underestimated one thing. I wasn't some frail old woman waiting to die. I was a mother, fighter, and I was just getting started. We filed charges: attempted murder, financial fraud, identity theft. The police issued a warrant for Marcus, who had vanished the day Stephanie was arrested. But they made one mistake. One breadcrumb they didn't erase. Receipt. 2 weeks before the arrest, Stephanie had bought a prepaid phone and groceries from a gas station on the outskirts of town. The security footage showed a man, tall, scar on his neck, waiting in the car. Marcus. They ran facial recognition and found a match to an old mugshot. But what chilled everyone was the timestamp on the security footage. It was 3 hours before Thomas's business trip. The same day he found his car keys mysteriously misplaced. The same day Stephanie insisted he use the company car instead. She'd sent him away, so Marcus could come closer. The puzzle pieces were coming together. And what we discovered next, it would change everything. Because the man we were hunting wasn't just after my money. He was after something else entirely. Something hidden in the very attic of the guest house I was living in. Stay close. Next chapter will reveal the secret hidden above the rafters, and the terrible truth about Stephanie's final plan. If you've been moved, shocked, or angry with me, comment your thoughts below, like and hit that subscribe. You'll want to hear what was found in that attic. I had lived in that guest house behind Thomas's mansion for over 2 years, and never once did I think to climb into the attic. My knees weren't what they used to be, and frankly, I had no reason to snoop. Until the police came knocking at my bedroom door again. This time not with handcuffs, but with a question that stole the breath from my lungs. "Ma'am, do you know anything about the strongbox hidden above your ceiling insulation?" I blinked. "What strongbox?" The officer led me outside. Lily followed, her arms crossed tightly, her eyes already brimming with suspicion. Two crime scene techs lowered a locked metal box from the attic, dusty, dented, and heavy enough to require two men to carry it down. They opened it on the patio table, with gloves and great care. Inside were papers. Dozens of them. Ledgers. Decopies. Count numbers. Even fake passports. But at the very bottom was a single photograph. One I hadn't seen in 50 years. It was me. Me. And a man I hadn't thought about since the 1970s. Robert Cray. My breath hitched. My throat dried. Thomas stepped forward. "Mama, who is that?" I sat slowly. Robert Cray had been my first love. We were inseparable once, but poor, reckless, and too young. He was drafted and sent to Vietnam. I married Harold, your father, not long after I thought Robert died in combat. But Robert didn't die. He came back years later with nothing but a limp and a steel heart. He said he'd loved me still. That he would always love me. But I was married. I had children. I turned him away. And that day I thought it ended. But apparently, it hadn't. Because in that same box, beneath those yellowed photos and banking papers, was a letter. It was addressed to Stephanie. To my dearest daughter. If anything happens to me, know this. The Cray inheritance will someday be yours. The house, the land, and yes, the account numbers I left in that box. But you must be smart. Stay close to the old woman. Stay patient. Get to the will. And remember, Martha owes me this life. She took everything. It's time we take it back. Stephanie wasn't just a gold digger. She was Robert Cray's daughter. And she had come for vengeance. The revelation nearly dropped Thomas to his knees. You mean this was never about love? Not even about money? It was personal, I said softly. It was always personal. Robert had held a grudge for decades. He'd somehow tracked me down again. Found out where I lived. Maybe he never stopped watching. And when he died 2 years ago, quietly, in a hospice facility under a false name, he passed his bitterness to Stephanie like a cursed heirloom. She came into our lives like a lamb. And was trained by a wolf. It explained everything. Her urgency. Her resentment. The hatred that bubbled under her smile. The way she looked at me like I owed her something she could never name. She had waited years for the right moment. She targeted Thomas. She manipulated her way into the family. And then, once she had access to the house, she began the real plan. Earning trust, isolating me and planting chaos. But it wasn't enough for her to just steal my inheritance. She needed me to suffer. That's why she went after my medicine. Why she started making mistakes that could get me hospitalized. Why she arranged for Marcus to hover like a shadow, waiting to step in when the time was right. Marcus, it turned out, had been hired by Robert years ago. A handyman. A bodyguard. A criminal with no roots and no loyalties. Stephanie didn't fall in love with him. She inherited him, like one would inherit a weapon. And he was still out there. Still waiting. We doubled the patrols at the house. Police officers parked outside every night. Lily refused to leave my side. But I could feel something creeping. Something unfinished. Because Marcus hadn't vanished. He was circling. One night I heard the dogs barking wildly. I sat upright in bed, heart pounding. When I looked out the window, I saw a figure at the edge of the tree line. Tall, broad, unmoving. He stood there for 10 minutes, staring at the house. Then he turned and disappeared into the dark. We called the police again. They searched the woods but found only cigarette butts, boot prints, and a red handkerchief caught on a branch. He's watching, Lily said. Waiting for an opening. But what he didn't know was that I was ready. I wasn't going to die a victim. Not for Robert. Not for Stephanie. Not for some man with blood under his fingernails. I started preparing in secret. Gathering every document, every record, every lie. I was going to expose the entire scheme. I wrote it all down. A memoir of sorts. Titled plainly, "The Woman Who Wouldn't Die for Your Revenge." Thomas begged me to leave town. Lily pleaded with me to go into hiding. But I refused. "You don't run from shadows," I told them. "You turn on the light." And then, just as the world felt steady for a moment, the police delivered news that turned everything upside down again. They had caught Marcus. But not in our town. He had been arrested in another state, after trying to contact a woman through an underground forum about false documents. The message read, "Need a death certificate forged. Elderly woman. Must appear natural." My name was in the subject line. They extradited him immediately. But what he said in interrogation shook the officers to their core. He claimed he wasn't working alone. He claimed there was one more name. Someone who had helped hide Stephanie's secrets. Someone inside our family. And when they told me who it was, I dropped the glass in my hand and collapsed into my chair. Because it wasn't a stranger. It was someone I once held in my arms like a child. And that person had sold me out for a price. Don't leave now. Next chapter will take you into the final betrayal. Closer than blood, deeper than lies. Like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe if this story has taken you by surprise. The worst is still coming. The police officer didn't say it gently. There was no slow build-up, no hesitation in his voice. He simply looked me in the eye and said, "It was Lily's father. Your late son Peter's best friend. Jacob West." My mouth went dry. Jacob had been like a second son. He was there the day Peter died in that car accident. He held my hand at the funeral. He helped raise Lily when grief took her mother into a fog of pills and silence. He painted my porch, fixed my gutters, sat with me on holidays so I wouldn't feel alone. And now I was being told he helped plan my murder. I shook my head. "No," I said, my voice trembling. "No, not Jacob." The officer sighed. "We have a paper trail. Wire transfers. Stephanie deposited over $12,000 into his account over the course of 8 months. There are also encrypted messages between them using burner phones. He helped create the fake medical records, ones that would make it look like you were terminally ill." I felt the room spin. Lily stepped forward. "That can't be. Uncle Jacob would never, he's family." But the truth doesn't care how close someone once held your hand. The truth simply waits to be seen. We drove to the police station in silence. When they brought Jacob into the viewing room behind the glass, I hardly recognized him. His gray hair was disheveled. His face, usually so calm, was twitching at the corners, jaw clenched. He didn't ask for a lawyer. He asked for me. I stepped into the room, escorted by 2 officers, and sat down across from him. He lifted his eyes to mine. "Martha," he said, voice cracking. "I'm sorry." I didn't speak. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I didn't mean for it to go that far. I swear it. I thought it was just to speed things along. A little pressure here, a little misdirection there. I didn't know they were going to kill you." I swallowed hard. "But you took their money." He nodded slowly. "Yes." "Why?" "Yes." He was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Because I'm dying. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. I didn't want Lily to worry. I didn't want anyone to know. And they offered enough to cover the debt on my house and leave something behind for her." My hand shook. "You thought my life was worth that." He cried then, right there in front of me. And I didn't know if I hated him or pitied him more. That night, back at the house, I sat in my chair and stared at the fire until it died out to cold ashes. Lily brought me tea and didn't speak a word. She just sat at my feet and rested her head on my lap like she was 5 years old again. I stroked her hair. "I don't know what hurts more," I whispered. "That they tried to kill me, Or that I didn't see it coming. Lily looked up at me. You survived, Nana. You're still here. That's what matters. But it wasn't over. Because even though Stephanie was in jail and Marcus was in custody, the will they were so desperate to steal, the real will, was still in limbo. And the media had caught wind of the story. A headline ran the next morning. Elderly woman survives murder plot by daughter-in-law for family fortune. Then another. Family betrayal and blood money. The Martha Collins case. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. Lawyers, reporters, distant relatives I hadn't heard from in 20 years suddenly wanted to check in. The family name, once quiet and respected, was now fuel for public drama. And then, just when we thought we had contained the fire, Thomas received a letter. It was from Stephanie, handwritten, sent from the county jail. He brought it to me, trembling, and asked, "Should I read it?" He nodded. His voice cracked as he began. "Thomas, if you're reading this, I'm probably already gone. Not dead. Just erased from your life like you always knew I would be. You were never strong enough to hold on to anyone, not even your own mother. But I loved you. I truly did. Until I realized you were too stupid to see what she was. What she did to my father. What she stole from him. From me. This wasn't just about the will. This was justice. You chose her over me. Now you'll die alone like she should have." He stopped halfway through, tore the letter in half, and left the room without a word. But there was one more page. Second note taped to the back. This one was shorter, hastier. It simply read, "Tell Marcus to finish what we started. Even if I rot in here. He knows what to do." We reported the letter to the police. They moved us into protective detail immediately. I was relocated to a safe house. 2 officers watched my door every night. But fear had crept in. Marcus wasn't just a threat. He was a man with nothing left to lose. And he had already escaped custody once before. I lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, staring at the ceiling and wondering, was I going to have to bury my own son's wife? Was I going to have to bury someone else I loved? Was I next on Marcus's list? Or had this nightmare only just begun? Don't go anywhere. Next chapter will take you into the escape, the final manhunt. And the moment I realized survival wasn't enough, I had to fight back. If this story has gripped your heart like it has mine, leave a comment, share your thoughts, and hit subscribe. We're not done yet. The morning started quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes the birds outside stop chirping, the coffee feel colder, and the air carry a weight you can't name. I was sitting in the safe house's kitchen, staring at my tea when the knock came. 3 soft raps. Not the police knock. No urgency, no voice calling out. Just deliberate. Calculated. One of the officers stepped forward and checked the peephole. I watched his brow furrow, then twist with concern. "There's nobody there," he muttered. He opened the door cautiously. A single envelope lay on the doorstep. No name. No return address. Inside was a photograph. Me, taken from behind, walking into the safe house 3 days earlier. A red X was drawn across my back in marker. I didn't scream. I didn't gasp. I simply said, "He's here." Marcus had found us. Within an hour we were moved again. New location. Higher security. Silent transport. Thomas, Lily, and I were told to keep our phones off unless on secure lines. But none of that stopped the letters. One arrived every day. Some were shoved under the back door. Some were stuck inside the mail slot despite it being locked. One was taped to the windshield of the police cruiser. "You can't hide from rot, Martha. I'll finish what she couldn't. You'll wish the pillow had worked." I began to wonder. How was he getting so close? The answer came 2 days later, when one of the officers on our assigned rotation disappeared for over 3 hours. His body was found in a drainage pipe behind the station. His badge and uniform were gone. Marcus had killed him. He had been posing as law enforcement. He had been walking freely among us. I remember the day I broke. I was in the panic room. hidden in the basement behind a false shelf, when Lily looked at me and whispered, "You don't deserve this. You did everything right. You loved everyone. Why does it feel like the world's punishing you?" I took her hands in mine and said, "Because sometimes evil doesn't come in through the door. Comes in through family. And once it's inside, it knows where all the locks are." But I wasn't going to die hiding in a basement. That's when the shift happened. I asked to speak to the lead detective. I said, "Let me be the bait." He nearly laughed in my face. "Ma'am, with all due respect." "No," I cut him off. "With all due respect to you, you've been trying to catch this man for weeks, and he's still 3 steps ahead. But he doesn't want money. He doesn't want escape. He wants me. So let me give him what he wants. Let's end this." The team argued. Thomas screamed. Lily sobbed. But I stood firm. Because running wasn't protecting anyone anymore. The plan was simple. I'd appear at a fake public estate meeting, announcing a new, final version of the will. The media would report on it. Stephanie, still awaiting sentencing, would see it on the news. Marcus would too. We knew he'd come. He always did when the spotlight burned hot. The event was set up in the county hall. Tightly controlled. Only vetted attendees. Hidden cameras. Officers in disguise. Snipers on the roof. And I, dressed in a navy shawl, hair pinned, hands steady, walked up to the podium and spoke into the mic. "My name is Martha Collins," I said, voice trembling but strong. "And this is the last time anyone will question who controls my life." I held up a folder. "My final will, official, signed and sealed, leaves everything to my granddaughter Lily. And if anything happens to me before the ink dries, then may the courts bury everyone involved." There was a pause. And then, a gunshot. The glass shattered behind me. Panic erupted. But I didn't flinch. I dropped behind the podium just as trained. Officers tackled the crowd. The sound of boots, screaming, gunfire. And then, silence. Marcus had tried to shoot me. But instead, he'd shot a decoy glass wall, thinking it would collapse and give him access to the stage. He didn't realize it was reinforced bulletproof. He didn't realize he'd just exposed his exact location. He was captured within seconds. Armed, bleeding from a scraped leg, and growling like a caged wolf. I was escorted to safety. They took Marcus away screaming, "You'll never be safe, old woman. There are more of us. She wasn't the only one who hated you." And that was the moment I realized something darker. Stephanie had planted more seeds. She wasn't the only person from the past who thought I owed them something. And maybe, just maybe, someone else was still waiting. But that was a problem for another day. For now, Marcus was behind bars. Stephanie was awaiting sentencing. Jacob had pled guilty and was now under hospice care. Thomas. He was just beginning to forgive himself. We all were. But healing is never a straight line. Especially when ghosts don't stay buried. Because a week after Marcus's arrest, I received one final letter. No return address. No handwriting match. Just one line written in blood-red ink. "Stephanie is pregnant. Don't miss the next chapter." What happens when the woman who tried to kill you is carrying your family's next generation? Like, comment, and subscribe if you believe this story can still twist again. Because it will. Stephanie is pregnant. The words echoed in my mind like church bells rung in a burning cathedral. Loud. Unrelenting. Horrifying. I held the letter with trembling hands, staring at the single haunting sentence over and over. It wasn't signed. No proof. No medical records. No confirmation. But I knew in my bones it was true. The woman who tried to smother me in my sleep, who conspired to erase my name and rewrite my will with her own blood-stained hands, now carried the child of my son. My grandchild. And in that moment, all the rage I had been holding back boiled over, not into screams but into stillness, into deep, terrible grief. What happens when the one you hate becomes the mother of someone you might someday have to love? Thomas sat across from me at the dining table, the letter spread open between us. His hands were locked into tight fists, knuckles white. I don't know what to do, he whispered. You don't have to decide today, I said. But she's carrying my child, he muttered, eyes wide, as if the reality had only just hit him. What kind of life is that baby going to have? Raised by a woman like her. Born into that kind of poison. Lily sat beside me, jaw clenched. What if she's lying? What if this is just another manipulation? But my gut said otherwise. Stephanie had nothing else to use against us. No more lies to spin, no Marcus to carry out her violence. This wasn't a move. This wasn't a trick. It was a checkmate. In one dark moment, Stephanie had bound herself to our lives forever. And worse, the justice system agreed. Because in court during her bail hearing, she stood in an orange jumpsuit with her hands on her belly and told the judge, I'm pregnant with Thomas Collins's child. And for the sake of my unborn baby, I ask for leniency and house arrest pending trial. Gasps echoed in the courtroom. Thomas, sitting beside me, squeezed my arm so tightly I thought it would bruise. The judge, a woman in her late 50s with a tired gaze, studied Stephanie carefully. Then she asked the most important question. Do we have medical confirmation? Her attorney nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Blood work and ultrasounds have been submitted. It was real. Stephanie was 4 months pregnant. And suddenly everything changed. The prosecution pushed back, of course. Tried to argue that her pregnancy shouldn't erase the danger she posed, the intent behind her crimes, the pain she had inflicted. But public opinion began to shift. News stories ran headlines like, Murder plot twist. Would-be killer is now expecting the victim's grandchild. Motherhood or manipulation. Public divided over Stephanie Collins. Social media exploded. Some people defended her. Others wanted her behind bars for life. But all I could see was the war coming. Because that child, innocent, unaware, unformed, was still half mine. Still blood of my blood. And if Stephanie raised it, she'd raise it in hate. Thomas and I sat down with lawyers. We discussed custody, rights, next steps. And one truth emerged. If we wanted to protect that child, we had to prepare to raise it. The thought made me nauseous. Could I hold that baby in my arms and not see its mother's eyes? Could Thomas look into a face that shared Stephanie's smile and not fall into the past again? One night, I woke to find Lily sitting on the front steps, crying into her palms. She tried to kill you, Nana, she sobbed. And now we're going to raise her baby. How is that fair? It's not, I said, sitting beside her. None of this is fair. But you don't protect the innocent by letting the guilty win. A week later, Stephanie requested a video call from jail. Thomas agreed. I watched from the corner of the room as her image flickered onto the screen. Her hair was pulled back. Her face was paler, thinner. But her eyes still held that same defiant glint. Hello, Thomas, she said softly. He didn't reply. She looked down at her stomach. It's true. I'm pregnant. And I want this baby to have a future. One better than mine. He finally spoke. You tried to murder my mother. She flinched just a bit. I didn't go through with it. You tried, he growled. You would've. If you hadn't been stopped. She looked up. Then let me make it right. Let the child be the good that comes from all this bad. You don't get to decide that, he said. I'll give up my rights, she whispered. If you promise to raise it. If you promise to keep it safe. Just don't let strangers take it. Don't let it end up like me. The call ended without another word. Thomas walked out of the room and didn't come back in for hours. And that night I made my decision. I was going to raise the baby. Not out of pity. Not out of guilt. But because no child deserves to carry their mother's sins on their back like chains. Because I had survived the fire. And now I would protect what remained in the ashes. But as I sat alone, staring at the fire crackle, I felt something stir in my chest. Not fear. Not hope. Because the story wasn't over yet. And the next chapter wasn't going to be about courts or custody. It was going to be about revenge. Because Stephanie wasn't done. And she had already made her next move. A move that would put Lily's life in danger. You're not ready for the next chapter. But come anyway. Because now, it's not just about me. It's about the granddaughter I swore to protect. If this shook you, comment, like, and subscribe. We're racing toward the truth. The threat didn't come with a scream. It didn't come with a gunshot or a crashing window or another letter on the doorstep. It came in silence, disguised as something we thought we wanted. Custody hearing date. The court had scheduled it. Martha Collins versus Stephanie Collins. The state would determine whether Stephanie's parental rights should be terminated, and if Thomas and I could legally raise the child once it was born. It was what we asked for. But it was also when Stephanie made her move. 3 nights before the hearing, Lily went missing. She had gone to the store after dinner, just to get diapers for a friend's baby shower, and never returned. Her phone was found in the parking lot, screen cracked, flashlight still on. Thomas called every friend she had. I drove through half the city in a borrowed car from the sheriff's office, barely breathing, barely blinking. And then we got the call. Block number. Low male voice. You take her baby, I take yours. Fair trade, Grandma. I fell to my knees in the driveway, the wind knocked out of me. Thomas screamed into the phone. Where is he? But the line had already gone dead. It wasn't Marcus, he was still behind bars. No, this voice was different. Controlled. Cold. And somehow even more terrifying. The sheriff sent out an Amber Alert. Not for a child but for a young woman, my granddaughter, kidnapped in the heart of town. Hours passed. Then a day. Then 2. No ransom demand. No note. Just silence. And the dread grew like a tumor in our chests. On the 3rd day, I received a box at the front door of the safe house. Inside, a pair of Lily's shoes, neatly folded socks, and a note in red marker. Next time it'll be her head. The handwriting was rushed, messy. But there was something familiar in it. I took it to the sheriff. Their forensic team confirmed it. The note was written by a woman. Stephanie. From inside jail. How? I whispered. She's been locked up. Isolated. Watched. But that's where I underestimated her again. Stephanie hadn't just manipulated her way into our family. She had corrupted people around her. She had followers. 2 guards had been working with her. Women who believed her story, that she was a misunderstood wife, a mother trying to protect her unborn child from a bitter old woman who hated her. They'd smuggled in letters, food, even a burner phone. And one of them, Officer Geraldine Marsh, had a son named Noah. The same man who had made the call to us. The one holding Lily. They found his vehicle through surveillance footage at the store parking lot. Tracked it to a remote cabin 2 counties over. We rode with the sheriff's team. Thomas couldn't sit still. His knees bounced the entire ride. My heart felt like it was being gripped by a fist. When we reached the cabin, officers moved in fast and quiet. Noah was taken down in the backyard trying to run. He had a knife. Blood on his clothes, but it wasn't Lily's. Inside they found her. Tied to a chair, mouth taped shut, eyes swollen but alive. I held her for an hour, rocking her back and forth, whispering, "You're safe now. You're safe now." But something in her had changed. She was quieter. Her eyes, once sharp and bright, now looked past people. Thomas broke down when he saw her. He wept like I've never seen a man weep. But the real shock came the next morning. Stephanie had vanished. The 2 corrupt guards confessed to helping her escape during a medical transport. They claimed she sedated a nurse, switched clothes, and walked out through the back loading dock of the prison hospital. 8 months pregnant and full of venom. And now she was gone. The FBI got involved. Every bus station, train terminal, and motel was searched. But she had disappeared like smoke in a storm. And just like that, everything we thought we'd survived twisted back into something worse. Because now there was a baby coming into the world. And we didn't know if Stephanie would raise it, or use it as a weapon. I couldn't sleep. Every night I dreamed of pillows, of cold hands, of Lily screaming, and of that baby, crying somewhere in the dark, waiting for a mother who might never love it, and a grandmother who might never find it. But I made a vow in that moment. I would find her, and I would end this, not through blood, not through violence, but through something more powerful, truth. Because there was still one person who hadn't spoken. Thomas. He had spent months in silence, caught in the crossfire of the woman he married and the mother who raised him. But now I needed his voice. The world needed his voice. We decided to go public. Press conference. National television. Full confession. The whole story, from the will to the poisoning to the escape. We named names, showed letters, played the audio from the ransom call. The media went wild. But more importantly, the public turned. No longer divided, no longer confused. Stephanie became America's most wanted. And 2 weeks later, a call came from a small clinic in Florida. A woman, going by the name of Sarah Clark, had just given birth and disappeared, leaving the baby behind. The nurses were suspicious. They ran the prints she left on a pen. It was her. The baby was rushed into protective care. Thomas and I got on the next flight. And when I first held that child, a tiny baby girl with dark curls and trembling fingers, I didn't feel hatred. Felt fear. Fear that she might grow up to ask, "Why didn't you protect me from her?" But I also felt hope. Because she wasn't her mother. She was a chance to break the cycle. To raise someone out of the rubble of revenge and into something beautiful. We named her Grace. 'Cause that's what it felt like. Second chance. But Stephanie, she's still out there. And what she left behind next would change our lives again. Don't go anywhere. Next chapter is coming, and you won't believe what Stephanie sent from the shadows. Like, comment, and subscribe if this story has kept your heart pounding. It's not over. I thought holding Grace in my arms would mark the end of our nightmare. That maybe, just maybe, we had come through the fire whole, scarred but not broken. But monsters don't disappear just because you close your eyes. And Stephanie, she wasn't finished. 3 weeks after Grace's birth, we were home again. The FBI had closed in on several leads, but Stephanie remained a ghost. No credit cards, no phone pings, no sightings that stuck. Still, the home felt safer. Lily was healing. Thomas smiled more. Grace, she cooed when I sang hymns to her in the morning. Her little hand curled around my pinky like it was her lifeline. But peace is the most fragile thing. It shatters with a whisper. That morning the mail came as usual. A single manila envelope. No return address. No postmark. Just taped shut, with our street number handwritten in slanted black ink. I almost didn't open it. But curiosity has teeth. Inside was a flash drive. And a note. "Play me. Or I play you." We took it to the sheriff's office. Inside an evidence room surrounded by officers and agents, the tech plugged it in. A single video file loaded. And the screen went black. And Stephanie's face appeared. Her hair shaved short. Her eyes, wild, swollen, manic. She sat in what looked like a dark basement, candlelight flickering behind her. And then she spoke. "You thought you won. You thought taking my baby would fix everything. But you don't get to write the ending, Martha." "Do." "I always do." She held up a small doll. Made. Worn. Identical to the one I had sewn for Lily when she was 5. "Your granddaughter is safe now. But for how long? You raised her with faith. I'll raise mine with fire. And someday when she's old enough, I'll find her again. And she'll hear my side of the story." My heart dropped. Stephanie had recorded this before giving birth. She had planned every second of it. Her disappearance, her surrender of the baby, her final psychological twist. But she wasn't just threatening me. She was making a promise. A promise that her hatred would live on, even if she didn't. The authorities confirmed it was recorded days before she entered the Florida clinic. But the real horror. She hadn't been alone. In the background, someone else's silhouette passed the candlelight. Man. But it wasn't Marcus. And it wasn't Noah. Someone new. Someone still helping her. Someone still out there. And then the second part of the drive loaded. Audio. A conversation recorded secretly between Stephanie and Jacob West, my dead son's best friend. The one who had cried in the interrogation room. In the recording, his voice was clear. Once you're gone, they'll never suspect me again. I'll be back in their lives. You leave the baby. I'll get in good with Thomas. With Lily. And when the time is right, I'll be raising her. Like we planned. A chill ran through me so sharp I thought I might faint. He wasn't dying of cancer. He was playing us. He had lied from the start. The man who painted my porch. Who read bedtime stories to Lily. Who hugged me after Peter died. Had been working with Stephanie from the beginning. And worse. He had just been released from holding, cleared on false charges, and sent back home under a court-monitored program. He was free. And he was coming back. I grabbed Grace tighter that night, holding her as if I could squeeze the curse out of her little body. Thomas and I filed for an emergency restraining order. The sheriff agreed to 24-hour patrol again. But I knew. Jacob didn't want revenge. He wanted redemption in his twisted mind. To raise the child of the woman who tried to kill me. To finish what Stephanie started. Only now, the battleground wasn't my bed or the will. It was Grace. Thomas sat me down in the kitchen that night. He looked tired, older. Like all the fire in his bones had burned down to ash. I want to move, he said. Somewhere far. New names. New place. Raise Grace where no one knows us. And what about Lily? Yes. She'll come. She wants out of here more than we do. And so we made the decision. New identities. A quiet town in Montana. A small farmhouse on the edge of a snowy field. We packed our things. Burned the letters. Deleted old social accounts. We told only the sheriff and Lily's closest friend. And we ran. But before we left, I did one thing more. I wrote Stephanie back. Not on paper. In camera. I recorded myself, sitting in front of that same candlelight. And I said, "You're right, Stephanie. You do get to write your story. But I get to raise your daughter. And she will know love. She will know truth. She will know everything. She'll see your face in pictures and read your words with tears. But she will never become you. Because I'm not the woman you tried to kill. I'm the woman you couldn't." We left Charleston the next morning. By nightfall we were on the other side of the country. And for the first time in years I slept without fear. Until the baby monitor lit up. Noise. A whisper. Voice. "Grace." I ran into the room. Nothing. Just her sleeping peacefully. But the window. It was open. And the cold air smelled like smoke. Next chapter is the final chapter. The confrontation. The last chance. The ending you've been waiting for. If you've stayed this far, please like, comment and subscribe. You won't believe how it ends. I stood frozen in the nursery. The icy Montana wind curling around my ankles, my nightgown rustling in the draft. Grace slept peacefully, one tiny hand resting against her cheek. But the open window told me everything I needed to know. He had been here. Jacob. Maybe not inside, but close. Close enough to touch the glass, to breathe the same air as her. Close enough to whisper her name. Thomas barreled in seconds later, holding a fireplace poker in one hand. Lily followed, clutching her phone. She'd already dialed the sheriff. "They'll be here in 10 minutes, she said, chest heaving. But I wasn't thinking about the police anymore. I was thinking about her. Stephanie. The seed she planted. The obsession she nurtured in Jacob's heart like a weed in the soil of his brokenness. This wasn't about Grace anymore. It was about power. It was about winning. The next morning we found Jacob's note taped to the barn door. "You ran. But you brought her to me anyway. It was always supposed to end this way. I'll raise her in my image. Even if it's only in her dreams." Thomas nearly broke the door off its hinges trying to rip it down. We knew what was coming. Jacob wanted a final confrontation. And we were going to give it to him on our terms. We called the sheriff again. This time we laid it all out. The previous threats, the fake cancer diagnosis, the escape plan, the audio recordings. They coordinated with federal agents, set up surveillance, put a tracker in Grace's diaper bag, armed us, trained us. Even Lily carried a small revolver in her boot. Because this time we wouldn't be hiding in panic rooms. We'd be waiting. And Jacob would walk into our trap. We staged a routine. Every Wednesday, I took Grace for a walk around the property. I wore my thick coat, pushed her stroller in slow loops near the garden. And each time we'd leave a trail, a visual cue for Jacob to follow. We left the back gate unlocked. We kept the floodlight off. We made it look easy. And sure enough, on the third Wednesday just after 3 p.m. he came. He stepped out of the tree line dressed as a ranch worker, a flannel shirt and jeans, cap low over his eyes. He carried no weapon, just a toy rattle in one hand. He approached me with a smile. "Hi there, Martha. It's been a while." I stood my ground. "You're trespassing." He tilted his head. "I've always belonged with this family. I belonged with Peter, with Lily, with Grace. You just couldn't see it." Officers moved into place silently behind him. They waited for my signal. But I wanted to speak. "One last time. You were Peter's friend," I said softly. "You could have been family. You were this close to being loved. But instead you chose shadows." His face twitched. "You chose to help the woman who tried to kill me," I said. "And now you're here, trying to steal her child." "She's my child," he snapped, stepping forward. "I helped create this life. I was there before she was even born. I protected Stephanie. I protected the plan." "No," I said firmly. "You poisoned it. And now the cycle ends, with you." I pressed the button in my coat pocket. Agents closed in fast. Jacob turned to run. But Lily stepped out from behind a tree and fired a warning shot into the air. "Try me," she said through clenched teeth. He dropped the rattle. Dropped to his knees. Sobbing. They cuffed him and dragged him away, screaming Stephanie's name like a prayer. It was over. 3 months passed. Grace learned to sit up. Lily started therapy. Thomas went back to writing music, something he hadn't done since Peter's funeral. As for me, I started gardening again. I needed to touch the earth, to remind myself that life grows even in the shadow of death. Jacob was sentenced to 25 years without parole. Stephanie was never found again. But we did receive one final message. It came as a letter, typed and signed from somewhere overseas. It read, "One day she'll ask about me. And I hope you tell her the truth, that I tried to give her power and you gave her love. Let's see which one lasts longer." I burned it, because the past no longer controlled me, no longer controlled us. We raised Grace in laughter, in safety, in truth. We told her everything when she was old enough. We let her cry, let her question, let her choose her own light. And she grew up strong, smart, kind. She didn't inherit Stephanie's hatred. She inherited my will. And every time she hugged me, every time she kissed my cheek or asked for another bedtime story, I remembered that night, when I woke to hands on my face and a pillow crushing down. And I whispered to myself, "I'm still here." Because revenge doesn't win. Not when love stands in its way. Not when grandmothers fight like lions. If this story moved you, challenged you, or reminded you that strength has no age, please like, comment your thoughts and subscribe. Your voice matters. And someone out there needs to know that no matter how dark it gets, survival is possible.